So over the last year or so, we've been getting little bits of information from Sony about the PlayStation VR 2. We've also seen some recent hands-on time at Tokyo Game Show, and people seem very impressed with the device, which is exciting stuff because the PlayStation VR, the first one, or the only one right now, you look at it currently compared to other things in the market, it is fairly primitive in what it's able to do completely, right? So seeing this new device, hearing about how people are happy with its performance, great. We're looking forward to it coming out. But we had some information come out today that is not going over well online, and it's actually something I've been expecting to get announced at some point, mostly because Nate has been saying this for months now, and I kind of would push it off and be like, we'll see. That seems like it'd be difficult to work around, and well, it looks like it's the case. The PlayStation VR 2 will not be backwards compatible with current PlayStation VR games, and we'll go over all of this here today. Guys, if you enjoy these videos, make sure that like button helps out a ton, and if you're new here to the SpawnWave Plus channel, make sure you subscribe down below. Let's head over to Push Square. And like I said, this is breaking from less than an hour ago. PlayStation VR 2 isn't backwards compatible with PSVR games. Sony has now confirmed this. So this isn't from like a third-party source or a rumor. Sony themselves are confirming this. This is on the latest episode of the official PlayStation podcast. SVP of Platform Experience, Hideki Nishino, says this is because PSVR 2 is designed to deliver a truly next-generation VR experience, citing new features like the Sense controllers and inside-out tracking. This means developing games for PSVR 2 requires a whole different approach to original PlayStation VR. They say with backwards compatibility now off the table, the only way for PSVR classics like Astrobot, Rescue Mission, and Beat Saber to become playable on PSVR 2 now would be through new updated versions like a patch. So this, as I said, kind of expected, at least it was in my mind that this could be a possibility. As I said, Nate and MVG have been talking about the idea of this newer headset not playing like current PlayStation VR games, and it seems strange from the outside looking in. I have been seeing some takes online for people who are a bit more familiar with the development space. I'm not out here developing these games, so I take their word at least for these kind of things. And yeah, it does appear that obviously it's different from the PlayStation VR, and the idea is developers have to go in and provide a patch for their game. Like Beat Saber would be able to work on the PSVR 2. They would just need a PSVR 2 version. I assume Astrobot could be another one that sees an update from Sony and Team Asobi to get it to the PSVR 2. And that's all well and good, but obviously that means that the PSVR 2 out of the gate is going to be fairly limited with its library. I mean, I don't think we're expecting hundreds of titles to be available day one for the PSVR 2. It took a while for the PSVR to at least build up a library of games. We're talking about several years that would have been very beneficial to be accessible for PSVR 2 right away. It just would have provided with a much larger library than what we're now anticipating here, since they have to be specifically PSVR 2 games. Doesn't mean that maybe Sony has been preparing and some of the games from like their publishing label or their first-party studios would be ready to go with a patch day one. Here's my other thing, though, and I'm going to think from the business side of things here right now. I'm going to think like I'm Jim Ryan. This is going to cost money. That's like immediately my thought that if I'm thinking Jim Ryan, I'm thinking money. Will these patches be free from PSVR to PSVR 2? Because we see the PS4 to PS5, I mean, that's $10 difference, right? $10 upgrade path. Will these games just be sold again as PSVR 2 titles? That's kind of where I am with this. Are they really going to provide free updates for these different titles that you may already own in your library? To me, it kind of makes sense to go that route because you're buying a headset that's, let's just get this out of the way for a second, is going to have sticker shock. I'm trying to prepare you for every time I talk about the PSVR 2. Think of the price that you right now believe it could be. Like just an estimate in your head, a prediction. Add at minimum $100 on top of that. Okay, that way you won't be surprised when they show up and tell you it's $500 or $600. It's going to be interesting when that price comes out. The reason I think this information is coming out, by the way, is because we are getting close to that big price reveal, since it's supposed to come out in the first quarter of 2023. At least that's been some of the talk. So they would want to open pre-orders in the next month or two to kind of get that ball rolling. So now we're finding out about it not being backwards compatible with PlayStation VR games. And as I said, that's going to kind of limit the library initially, unless Sony has been planning their strategy around this for at least the last year or so to have patches available. And outside of Sony, I would expect third parties would also be preparing patches, and those I could see just being free updates, mostly because the PSVR, while it sold well, I mean, it's like 5 million or so headsets sold, which is pretty good for a virtual reality headset. Even though the Quest has done better overall, you don't need any kind of system to go along with it. It's all in one, which is very appealing, I'm sure, for many people, because you don't have to deal with wires or a booster box or any of this other stuff. You just get the headset and you go. But there will be quite a bit of hype and interest in the PlayStation VR 2. So if you are a third party who has an original PlayStation VR game, if you get that thing updated and ready for launch, you could be there in a fairly limited pool of games just to basically sell your game again to a new audience who is showing up here for the latest PlayStation 5 hardware. But either way, this is certainly disappointing for fans of the original PlayStation VR, or people who are really into it still. As I said, it's kind of aged a bit, but I'm sure there are people who are still playing their PlayStation VR, at least on a somewhat consistent basis now, and they're looking over at their library games and are like, oh, well, I guess that's going to have to stay with this headset here, and I won't be able to use the new fancy headset for these games. So unfortunate on that end, but that's kind of where we are with the PSVR 2. We'll see if Sony has any more information around the situation between the libraries transferring over through way of free patches or paid patches. I'm thinking that's something they'll address when they start talking about launch date and pricing around this, since the pricing in particular, they're going to want to soften that a bit, maybe with free updates for certain games. At least get Astrobot Rescue Mission over, because that is legitimately a very good title that has kind of been stuck on that PlayStation VR headset, and it moving over to this newer VR 2 headset with some of the features and stuff would be really cool. And that's kind of where I think Team Asobi's going anyway, since they work with Sony and R&D and all of this. I'm sure they will have some sort of new Astrobot game ready to roll for VR2. But to kind of get that rescue mission, the first one to the headset, would be nice just to have it there. But let me know what you guys think about this. Certainly some disappointing news around this PSVR 2 headset. Were you expecting your library of PlayStation VR games to kind of follow you to this new headset, or were you thinking you're going to have to invest in a whole new library when you made the jump? Thanks, guys, for watching, and I'll see you next time.